In this video, we're going to examine a solution that was implemented as a services contract through IBM Expert Labs for a client. It is a custom safeguarded copy CyberVault environment dealing with VMware and IBM. It uses Copy Services Manager, IBM Copy Services Manager, to manage the safeguarded copies, and is got a 5200 IBM FlashSystem 5200 as the storage. The colors here identify, based on the NIST cybersecurity framework, which area each of these devices fits into, or multiple in the case of many of them. And then we have the security integration. So this client had a need to have safeguarded copies on both IBM and in their VMware environment. The IBM they're going to use the safeguarded copy toolkit, and they wanted to manage that from there. But they also wanted to still have security integrations, and they wanted something similar to the safeguarded copy toolkit for VMware to orchestrate the automatic quiesce and safeguarding of their VMs, as well as in response to a attack that was incoming, as well as recovering and cleaning up the recoveries for their VMware environment. The heart of this is all in the Copy Services Manager. It handles the safeguarded copy points. It is the piece that talks to the flash system. You'll notice that only it and Spectrum Control talk to the flash system. Both the other orchestrators work through Copy Services Manager. The Linux orchestrator here has a minimal use account where it's just a automation level access. So it has very little access to Copy Services Manager, just what it needs, as well as a limited access to the VMware vCenter environment, just the required permissions needed to do the work it's going to do. This gives you a little more security by having those features for the flash system implemented by another device and not having accounts that could be compromised on your endpoints in that way. So for the detection piece of this, the security integration, we have IBM Spectrum Control that is collecting usage statistics, performance statistics from the flash system. And when it notices something out of the normal, an I/O spike that's way beyond what their normal spikes are, it sends an alert over to the QRadar on the cloud. They had QRadar on the cloud as a requirement, so that doesn't allow us to do any action scripts in the environment. So we have to do a polling methodology to the QRadar of the cloud, which I will show you later in the video. And we also have VMware agents that are reporting to their EDR, XDR, the alerts, so that IBM QRadar is getting all of these pieces of information in. And when it detects a problem, it puts the IP or the vDisk or the data store that's detected with the problem onto a reference set. And the orchestration VM here from Linux goes and grabs it. And once it determines what safeguarded copy session to protect, it will go ahead and issue through Copy Services Manager in the flash system a response to protect that. And it also has the ability to limit the number of responses in an interval to avoid a denial of service type of attack. This also includes the IBM. IBM's performance information is also collected through Spectrum Control, and when it exceeds thresholds, we get an alert onto IBM, and it notes the IBM's disks, which are also safeguarded through this Linux orchestration VM, and we do an ad hoc orchestration. With that all covered at a high level, let's go into the actual environment. So we have a VMware environment here. And for the VMware environment, we're going to be looking at these 3 VMs, LBS QRadar, LBS SOAR, and LBS SOAR apps. They have sessions that are created here, LBS QRadar and LBS SOAR. If we look at one of these sessions, we can see that currently there's 12 safeguarded copy backups. If we come over here and we look at the scripts, you can see how this is all configured. A config utility was created, and you can see that we've got the vCenter login information for that restricted account. For the CSM server, we have the same restricted account login. We have a QRadar token that's been generated that has limited access to only read the reference set and delete items from the reference set. So it can't even access QRadar beyond just retrieving, kind of like a mailbox, messages for which IP or vDisk or data store needs to be protected. We have the storage information in here, which cluster is involved with the recovery, and then you'll see here we've got the volume protection. Volume protection is a feature that protects a volume from being deleted from the flash system if it has received a read or a write I/O within the normally 15-minute window. That's the minimum you can actually set it to. So if there's any I/O within 15 minutes and you try to delete that vDisk, it's going to refuse and fail. We want to show the handling of that, so I've got this set to 1 minute, even though it's way lower than would ever be able to be configured. It's going to show us that delay that's there to address this requirement. And then we're restoring to a cluster instead of just directly to a host. And if we use the command line utilities, take a look at what it knows about the environment, you'll notice that it takes a little bit of time every time we run one of these scripts. That's because it's a stateless architecture, intentionally not caching or storing any information, so that every time it runs, it has correct information. You can see that we've got the 2 sessions we looked at over here in Copy Services Manager. One has 1, one has 2, same for data stores, same for VMs. Normal status and protected session state. If we wanted more information, we can actually tell it to give us a full report. Again, it'll take just a second because it's requerying through the CSM API and the VMware API to retrieve information for the environment. And here you can see much more information. We have the backups for each session, when they were taken, when they're going to expire, what data stores are involved with each session, if there's any open recoveries, if there's any snapshots that exist. We can see that LBS QRadar has an old snapshot that's there, and what VMs are involved with each one of these. In addition to the command line utility, there is also a text-based GUI that was developed for them to make it a little easier. It has the same stateless architecture, and it's retrieving the information. And if we look over for the SOAR, we can see that it has, I believe it was 12, currently 12 backups. So if we're going to do a quiescent safeguard, we will go ahead and just do it for that session. We have options to disable the quiescent or safeguarding if we wanted to do just one or the other. Once we choose OK here, we get a confirmation of our actions. And once we confirm, we can come over here to the vCenter. We're going to see that it creates the snapshots, quiet snapshots for each of the VMs that are involved. And then it's going to call a safeguarded copy for that session. And once that completes, we're going to see it remove the snapshots to clean up after itself. If we come back over to this interface, we can see that it completed successfully. And if we go back to the command line, we can run it again. And we can see we now have a 13th point that was just taken a few seconds ago. This is also the orchestration for the recovery. If we look at the recovery, We can choose one of these sessions. Let's actually go right to the same session and that point we just took a second ago. Just a moment ago, we're going to use that one. We'll allow it to do the masking, scanning, importing of VMs, data stores, and we're going to have it disable the network so that it doesn't conflict with the existing VM, and then we're going to have it power on that VM for both of the VMs that are in that session. So we will go ahead and start that. Get our confirmation of the action. Confirm. What we're going to see over here in Copy Services Manager is there is no recovery currently, but momentarily we're going to see one created. And we're going to see it for this 932, point that ends in 932. There we have the point 932, which is created as a recovery for this session. We come over here to VMware again. We're going to see it's in the process of masking that storage over the cluster, and now it's requested a rescan. Come over here to the data stores. We're going to see it starting to pull in these snap data stores, a snapshot of the point in time of that data store above. And it's resignaturing them so they don't conflict. And there's one that's been resignatured. There's the other. We're going to see it pull those VMs in, and then it's going to revert to that snapshot. So it's at the quietest point. And there's the first one brought in. It's going to revert to the snapshot of the quietest point. It is now disabling the network so it doesn't conflict when it's turned on. And it's powering it on and answering the question that it was copied. If we launch this quick enough, we will actually be able to see the boot process. And it's now booted up. So now we have this VM with the backup point appended to it in the VM name that is also in the environment and can be looked at, evaluated. In looking at it, we've got a couple options here. We could disable the network on the original and enable the network on this point in time so that we could do some interactive checks with it. We could also shut down the original and either rename it or delete it, and then rename this new one back to the original name. And you can see that that VM is located on this data store. And all we would have to do is, after renaming it or whatever we want to do with it, we can vMotion it from this data store back to the other one. And it would then again be protected as this new version of the VM at the recovered point in time. So if we want to look at it from here, we can see that we've got a log that shows us all the steps and how everything was recovered. And if we come over here, we can also see from the command line utility, we now have, in addition to the backups, we have a recovery down here, which gives you details as far as what the vDisk is in the flash system and who it's masked to, the data store, and the backing is for each, the VM, and if it's powered on or not, networking connected now or at startup. We've got information there to evaluate the environment and what recoveries are in place. Once you've determined that you are done with that recovery, you can also see over here that this is now showing an R over here, indicating that that point in time is not only a backup, but is also in the recovery state. So if we terminate the recovery, you'll see that only that point shows up because it's the only one that's in recovery. Similar to when we did the recovery, we have the option to disable certain steps in the process. And here we're giving it the permission to power off the VMs and remove them. If we didn't give those permissions and there were VMs powered on or still using those data stores, the job will fail so that it doesn't do anything harmful to the environment. And then you would just rerun the job again. And once the problem's resolved with these options enabled, and it would properly clean it up the rest of the way. It skips over any steps that it's already done and continues where there's still steps to do. Here are the VMs that would be terminated and the data stores that will be removed. And we can go ahead and click OK here and confirm it. It happens very quickly over here, but we are going to see it's going to power off and unregister each of those VMs. They're gone now. If we come back here to the data store, it's going to unmount each of these data stores, and then it is going to disable the LUN and is going to do a rescan of storage so that the data stores pop out and clean up after itself. Now they're both unmounted. The rescan is going to make them disappear. And if we come back over here, you can see now, when we look at it, the recovery doesn't have the data stores mapped, doesn't have the VMs, but it does still have the disks mapped to the vCenter. And that's because it's waiting for 1 minute before it continues on and finishes removing it to simulate that volume protection. Okay, so it did pop up. I don't know how I affected the screen, but here's that timer that it counted down. We just couldn't see it. And once it completed, we can see that that session did in fact pop out right here. So that's the core safeguarding and quiescing and recovery and terminating recovery. But what about the security pieces? Well, as we mentioned, this client had QRadar on the cloud, and so they can't use a custom action to trigger things in their local environment because their SIM is actually in the cloud. So instead of triggering an action, they're going to add an entry to the reference set. So if we look at reference set, the rules in here are actually going to populate a reference set. And that reference set can have, even though it's called IPs to safeguard here, you can have an IP, a vDisk, or a data store name. I've got the IP address for the first one, data store for the SOAR, and I've got the vDisk for the LBS SOAR apps. Before we do that, I've got to go start the daemon here that is going to run and do that actual work. So you can see the command here. I'm running it so that it runs in the daemon as background. We're going to put a 1 minute interval. And if we look, you can see that the daemon has started up and it is pulling this IPs to safeguard. It's reaching out. Let it get one more pull before we do the next edition. There you can see the second pull. A minute later, we're going to go ahead and add these items into that list. One of each, a IP address, a vDisk, and a data store. And then we'll wait till the next interval. Here we hit the next polling interval. We can see that it has removed all those entries. It has flagged the SOAR apps, the QRadar, and the data store here. And it is starting to figure out which session those were part of. And it's actually started the quiesce and safeguard of the first session, the QRadar session. And here it's starting the second one. And if we scroll up and look just for comparison, we can see that there was 10 and 13 safeguarded points on each of the sessions before. We're going to let this go ahead and run to the next interval. Add in those same entries to show that it's got protection in there that's detected them again. It's removed them from the list. But we're going to see that when it goes to protect them, it already knows that I took the default of 1 hour wait time between taking additional safeguarded copies of the session, and it's going to wait that long before it can take another safeguarded copy of the session. So that is the polling piece, and if we now look at the environment, we'll see that each of these have one additional, so we should now be up to 11 and 14 backups. Here's 11. That was taken by the automated process. And there's 14. Having a QRadar on the cloud means we have to poll, which makes it we get a little bit of a dwell time with that polling, as you saw. If you had a QRadar SIM in your environment, you can actually use a custom action or SOAR and the fastest is going to be a custom action. It's near instantaneous. The SOAR gives you some additional capabilities in case management and correlating information, pulling information from other sources. So it really depends on your use case what the best option is for you. But that is the environment. We can see that Web Service Manager is back to the way it was, but we can see those additional, we're up to 14 points here. And that was the solution that was created for this client and is working very well today. Thank you for watching the video.